situation or the difficult situation, and dealing with that and having a productive and helpful resolution to that. And so that's what we've been looking at. How does God do it? How does he say we should do it? What in the Bible gives us direction with this, wisdom with this? And so it's been very, very helpful for us. And we looked at God being good at difficult conversations in lesson 1. And we're made in his image, so that means it's possible for us. And likely if we will do it God's way. Lesson number 2, what is it in me that hinders difficult conversation success? Lesson 3 was applying listening skills, and that listening skill is a crucial part of successful difficult conversations. Lesson number 4, what is the goal? What are you trying to accomplish? And that's, you need to have that clearly outlined going into resolving conflict. Lesson number 5 on timeliness, which was last week. And then this morning, we're going to look at the need for boundaries. Boundaries are very important in life. Can you say amen? And if you couldn't say amen, or maybe you said amen, but you don't really understand why, hopefully you're going to get some understanding, you're going to get some instruction, because they are a very vital part of difficult conversations. So I'm praying people get some revelation here this morning. And so boundaries clearly define limits, which we need in life. Boundaries must be established and must be enforced in and around your own life and in crucial or difficult conversations. And so Psalm 104 verse 5 to 9 in the NLT. I'll get some other scriptures before we launch out into that. Who can get for me Psalm 104 verse 9? Who can get that? Rocky. If we get the verse 9, we'll get that again in the New Living Translation. And then Genesis 1 verse 9 from Eddie. From Q, Genesis 2, 16 to 17. Benny, John 14, verse 15. John 14, 15. Laurie, could you please get... actually, that's the first point done, and then I'll get... Help me when we get scriptures next, I'll remember you for the next one. Actually, just get 1 Corinthians 5, verse 11. And we'll lock that one away. Hallelujah. Okay. So let's read our main text, Psalm 104, verse 5 to 9.
You placed the world on its foundation so it would never be moved. You clothed the earth with floods of water, water that covered even the mountains. At your command, the water fled. At the sound of your thunder, it hurried away. Mountains rose and valleys sank to the levels you decreed. Then you set a firm boundary for the seas so they would never again cover the earth.
Okay, so let's look first at God has boundaries. And so our main passage this morning reminds us that God has boundaries. One of the ways that he created the universe, the earth, is he set limits or he set boundaries. So this is just one example, verse 9 of Psalm 104.
Then you set a firm boundary for the seas so they would never again cover the earth.
Okay, so has anyone ever been to the ocean before? Put your hand up. Have you ever sat on the sand of the beach and thought, why does the water stay there and not come any further inland? How does that work? Anyone ever thought that? Or is it just me? Now we've seen obviously tides, they come in, you get what's called a king tide. And if you've ever come to Kurnell with us, there's a king tide where typically you can drive on the beach, but there are some times during the year you can't drive on the beach because the tide is so high, right? So we know about tides, and that's how the moon revolves around the earth and different pressures, gravity. I'll let you do your own science lesson and teach yourself on all of that. But the waters always recede roughly around the same line. Why is that? Why wouldn't they just keep going? Well, that's because God set boundaries. He put boundaries in place. He set limits. And so since the very beginning, God has implemented boundaries into his creation. Genesis 1, verse 9.
Then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place and let the dry land appear. And it was so.
Okay, so then there's boundaries and limits that he set in motion. In other words, he did it once, he spoke it into existence, and now these things are created within boundaries and limitations that remain. And so that's creation, but God also set boundaries for humanity. Genesis 2, 16 to 17.
And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die.
Okay, so boundaries here set for humanity. God set them in place. They're not automatic. In other words, we don't have to stick by them. It's not like we have to stand by them, but they're spoken firmly and clearly. And so we read of boundaries as the 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments are boundaries that God set around people. It's the law of Moses from the prophets in the Psalms, Jesus' teaching and the epistles. These are all boundaries. So John 14, verse 15.
If you love me, keep my commandments.
Okay, so those are boundaries. If you love me, you will live within the boundaries that I've set, or the limitations, right? And so all of this is reminding us that boundaries are necessary in life. Can you say amen? Can we all agree on that? Boundaries are necessary, but many struggle with boundaries. Individuals struggle with boundaries. Couples struggle with boundaries in their marriage. Parents struggle with boundaries. I've seen pastors who struggle with boundaries. Friends can struggle with boundaries. And oftentimes conflict within these relationships is because either the boundaries are not set correctly or the boundaries are being trespassed. They're being crossed over. And so, but people struggle with boundaries. And the question is why? Why is it that people struggle with boundaries? Well, usually it's because we misunderstand boundaries. People think that boundaries are unloving, right? Someone says no to you, and it's almost like this rejection issue rises up. You said no. You've heard Pastor Wayne Mitchell say, you don't know what's in a disciple until you say no to them. Right? Because some people, they read no as unloving. No, you're not going to do that. No, you're not going to say that. No, you're not going to whatever. You're not going to say that to my children. Some grandparents get up and get a little bit upset because they think no is unloving. How many are saying no isn't always unloving, and saying yes isn't always loving? How many don't play out in the car park to a 3-year-old isn't unloving? That's loving, but that's a boundary. You're saying no to a 3-year-old because you don't want to get him run over by a car. That's loving, right? But this lesson is far bigger than just the car park. Some think that boundaries are mean, unfair, or controlling, but boundaries are all around us. What side of the road do you drive on? Someone yelled it out, something like that. The left side. Someone's like, right side. You need to go back and get your license. The left side of the road, right? Anyone drive in the middle of the road? Why is that? Because there's a boundary in place, right? We stop at red lights. That's a boundary. And so boundaries are all around us. There are laws to abide by. There are laws, there are boundaries around making purchases. There are boundaries for doctors and procedures. And so where do we get this misunderstanding from that boundaries are not good or boundaries are unloving? Well, very often it's from experience. First, the experience. Some people, they've had bad experiences with boundaries. Right? So their past, maybe a lack of boundaries. Some people, they grew up as children and there were just no boundaries. The latchkey kids, Pastor Ernie Toppin's testimony. And I think from the age of 8, he had a key to the apartment they lived in. And his parents, his mum, they didn't care what time he got home. No boundaries. And when he got saved and he was invited back to a family's home, a husband and a wife, 3 kids, and he's looking at this is a family living within godly boundaries. Parents saying, hey, you sit up straight, don't throw your food at your sister, this is what I've lacked my whole life. This is what I want, right? But he's had bad experiences with a lack of boundaries. Others, it's on the other end of the spectrum. Right, you scratched your nose, you got whacked across the back of the head. Don't you move. Right, too rigid. And so you had bad experiences, either good or bad. bad experiences for either rigid or no boundaries at all. And so bad experiences can produce a twisted view. So there's a bad experience from experience. Others, it's seasonal. Different seasons of life, there are different pressures and stress. Some people, at times, they're working through trauma or financial lack or different seasons. And so boundaries, sometimes even seasons of blessing and breakthrough, right? You don't want it to stop, or you don't want it to have any, but you just want it to just explode. And so in seasons of life, we can struggle to view boundaries correctly. And then for others, it's desire. But I want this relationship. I don't want to have to set boundaries around it. I love him. I love her. Or I want this entertainment form. Or I want this, or I want that. And so because of our desires, so why do I have to set a boundary on that? It's good. I like it. I want it. And so then sometimes boundaries are a struggle because of what is in us. And so this is lesson 2. What is it in you that makes it difficult for you? And we looked at shadows, vulnerable weaknesses that we cave easily to people, right? So when there are shadows, we're vulnerable. These things form in us like pride, envy, judgment, or being judgmental. And so that shadow negatively affects us, right? We cave or we become vulnerable and are not good at setting boundaries around our own life. Sunburns are hurts from the past that affect us today. And so these trigger emotions, trauma, pain, difficult to set boundaries or view boundaries correctly with sunburns, unresolved issues, rejection. And this is a big one. People respond poorly in boundaries because of this. Them saying no to me, they're rejecting me. When it's not, or people with rejection issues, I don't want to say no to them, because I don't want them to reject me. I'm afraid that if I say no, they're gonna reject me. They're gonna be upset. I don't want them to be upset at me. And then the unmet core needs, security, identity, belonging, purpose, competence, going unmet. And so boundaries are affected. So in order to form strong boundaries, you need to work out what it is in you. What is it in me that works against me setting boundaries in my life? Is it issues that are within me? Is it negative experiences that I've had? Is it seasonal right now? Or maybe it's a desire that's blinding me from seeing that these boundaries are good. And we can be guilty. Those that are dating or looking at dating or hoping to date, it's dating with boundaries. Can you say amen? There's a great book for you. Boundaries in Dating. Write that down. Make sure that's one of your top reading books for the next 3 months, and get that read up, because it's crucial. Because once love is in the air, right, all you're seeing is bubble love hearts, and your vision goes blurry, and all you can see is the one that you love, and everything else just fades into the background. Right, and then when someone says a boundary, I love her, Pastor. What do you mean boundary? Right, it's very hard to see because you're goo goo gaga over that individual. And so you need to put boundaries in place. They're a blessing for us. And so what is it in me? Am I fighting boundaries because of rejection issues, because whatever it is? And then practically ask God to help you. God, you have boundaries. Help me to have a correct understanding. I need you to reach in here and help me. Answer this prayer. Give me a supernatural dose of the Holy Ghost to help me with boundaries. And another practical thing is be aware of you. Analyze, right? That's what Bible hour should be. That's what church should be. When the preaching goes forth, it's not that the word comes out, ping, you're looking at the person next to you. It's supposed to pierce your heart, right? And so analyze you, be aware of you. What is it that's rising up in me, and why? Why does this bother me? Why can't I stay firm on this? And then remember, you don't have to fix everything for God to help you. You start moving towards setting boundaries, trusting God. You don't have to fix everything for God to help you. Amen. That's the first point. Does anyone have a question? Question. Yes, no. Eugene?
Pastor, without being, brother softy, every little,
No one's going to think that, Eugene.
without being, just like every little comment, you're going to go pull them up about it. What are some clear indicators that, all right, maybe I need to have this conversation, this awkward conversation with someone? You know what I mean?
So elaborate a bit more.
Like, what are some indicators, I think, for a person to, all right, I definitely need to have a conversation with this person before it goes too far,
Right.
and put up a boundary?
Yeah, very good question. I think number one is dysfunction. I'm amazed at how, first of all, if anyone wants to call Eugene soft, if you've run a marathon, you can do that. Anyone run a marathon? All right, there you go. That's sorted. If you have, you can go tell him he's soft. Otherwise, anyway, moving on. Dysfunction is the first thing, right? And again, I talk to people. How long's it been going on, and what's going on? They're living in their car. I mean, they come when they come to church. They walk in at 10:45 and leave when pastor says bow your heads, close your eyes, right? Because what's going on? Oh, big going on, a bit of conflict. You can't live like that. In a marriage, the cold shoulder. When was the last time you spoke to him? 2019, pastor. You can't live like that, right? So dysfunction is a key. When it's starting to affect routine, right? Good routine, good godly habits. When it's starting to affect those, or take away from that, or distract from that. And that's one of the main reasons why we want to keep a good flow in our lives, in our church, in our marriage, right? We're going to have speed bumps. That's why we call it. What do you do with a speed bump? You don't stop, reverse, and go find another way. You go over it. Right? But the point is you've got to get over it and keep moving forward. Some people, they stop at the speed bump, or they get one set of wheels over, and then they're just sitting there. I don't want to have to go through that. That was difficult. That was uncomfortable. You can't live life like that. So it's when it's impeding on, if it's something you can manage. Whereas, okay, well, maybe I'll steer the conversation a certain way, or I'll, with people's skills, I can maybe try and lead them, in a certain direction. Those types of things. When that's available, or you're able to do that. But when it's not working, you need to have a conversation, and this is dysfunctional. This is not helping us. This is not working for us, and so that's probably the main. And it doesn't have to be for both parties. Some people, they do something, or something's going on, and they're just living their best life, completely unaware that it's affecting someone else. And obviously there's a line with that, right? It's like, you wear red, and I hate the color red, so I can't. It's just like, no, that's stupid. But something they're doing to offend, to violate, to whatever it is. That's we need to have a conversation. And sometimes they're not aware. But when it's dysfunctional for you, when it's impeding on your life, your marriage, whatever it is, you need to have a conversation. And so typically I don't wait. It's the first. If that I can see that being a repeated thing, so that's not going to work. So we need to address that. So that's and that's such a broad context. If there's a specific context, it changes things. You know what I mean, depending on what it is. But in a broad sense, dysfunction is probably the main. And so that's probably a very clear indicator to look at. Sometimes it's not, because people, if they've got rejection issues, they typically will absorb things. And they'll change their schedule and things without really even thinking. So, no, I can't do that. Yes, and they just, I just want to go to church on Sunday morning. I don't want, don't think twice about it. But you don't. It's like, but you're missing out on church. You've changed your whole schedule because you haven't correctly implemented a boundary, and you're not. It's just like, why would you do that? So there's a broad, I guess, a broad answer. but that's typically what I'm looking for. Is the flow of my life, different areas of my life, is that impacted? And if it is, it's like, okay, we probably need to have a conversation here. Yeah. I'm not pulling up any other indicators at the moment, but I'll let you know. Obviously, if it affects other people as well, if it's going to affect other people, it's another indicator. If it's something that happens to me, I have a decision personal to me, how I'm going to go about that. A lot of the stuff, that comes my way, I can let through to the keeper, but then when someone else comes to me and says that, whatever, and it's like, okay, it's affecting someone else now. And that's an issue. So, okay, it was me, so water off a duck's back, be a bigger man, it's like just be a mature Christian about it, take it to the altar. Then it's affecting someone else who's maybe not as mature or whatever, and there's another person, so okay, well it's affecting other people now. So it's your routine, disruption to life, but then also other people's lives is also an indicator. And there's often the case or the setting where in a couple, in a family, the husband is the covering. You're fielding things. Someone comes to you, your wife, or someone says something about your wife. You've got to filter that right now. You're the covering. You don't just go to your wife and say, I heard this and just give her the unfiltered version. She's going to have a mental breakdown, right? But when it's about you, it's like, whatever. But then my wife, now my kids, no, you're not. That's not going to happen. I'm stepping in. It's me. It's like, I can still sleep and go home to a beautiful wife and 3 healthy kids. If you want to carry on like that, that's on you. It's between you and God. But now my wife's, okay, well now it's a different, my wife's involved now. Now you're bringing my wife into this. You're bringing my children into this. So as a father and a husband, it changes things, right? To other people as well as an indicator. When other people are starting to be drawn into things, that's when you need to move. You can't wait. Yeah, very good. Great question. Anyone else on boundaries? All right, let's move on. Oh, Salati. Yep.
Sometimes in a relationship, like between a marriage or between you and your children, so boundaries already in place, but sometimes they test those boundaries, go beyond. And
not your kids, though.
No,
Surely.
no, generally. But what I mean is like, how can you deal with, because sometimes you're sick of it, and then you adopt that mindset, like, leave it to God. Leave it to God. You cannot do anything about it because they're adults. You cannot deal with it anymore.
Yep.
Protect your inner peace or things like that.
Yep.
So how is that a healthy mindset, or just to protect your peace?
That's a great question, Salati, and you've identified a number of different things in that. Number one, boundaries are change. With children, you set boundaries, right? Young children, but then when they grow old, obviously those boundaries change. You're not slapping them on the hand because it's like you're 25 now. If you're going to still pick your nose and I'm not going to slap you on the head. You got to figure that out. I've tried to teach you. I set boundaries. When children are little, you need to do a lot of boundary reinforcement, right? So you're going over things over and over again. That's what a good vindi or a little slap on the bottom is all about. I'm reinforcing boundaries here. I'm not trying to get my anger out on this child's backside, right? That's not discipline. Amen. That's why we don't smack in anger. But to reinforce the boundary, hey, this is a boundary. Don't touch the oven, right? And so you're reinforcing. So when they're young, you reinforce boundaries. But then when they're older, it's more of we're gonna establish some boundaries as adults, adult children, adult parents, and you may need to reinforce them with conversations. But at the point like you're saying, they test the boundaries, they continue to cross over them. Well, then, and it's probably partly in my notes this morning, is that it's like, well, I can no longer set boundaries with them. In other words, from me to them, or exhibit or impose boundaries in this relationship. I have to set boundaries around my own life. And so the focus now becomes myself. And because they're not going to listen to me, so now I have to Okay, so this is just, I have to set boundaries around my own life. There's no longer, boundaries in the relationship. And so, like you said, and that's a boundary. I have to preserve my own peace, right, and sanity. And so, okay, well then now I've got to set a boundary that may be harsh for them, but it's for my own well-being. Otherwise, I'm going to, and you fill in the blank, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to do something stupid because they're crossing the boundary. Okay, well now I'm setting a boundary around my own life, and that's going to preserve me, because then they're clearly shown they're not going to respect my boundaries. And that's on the extreme end of the spectrum. But oftentimes, and even with adult kids, they're good. You could say they're good kids. It's like, okay, can we talk? Can we have an adult conversation? We've maybe said we've had this conversation before, but I need to remind you, and then you re-establish the boundaries. Usually that's all it takes. And I remember having conversations with my parents, Dell's parents, as adults, and it's like, that's all it takes, And obviously we're all Christian, so it's it helps a lot, but it does help to be an adult. It's like, can we just talk? We have a chat, And some adults you can't do that because they still carry on like they're 3 years old having a tantrum, and so then that's when you've got to put boundaries around your own life. And that is what it is. I love you, I pray for you, but I have a boundary, and I'm not going to allow you to cross that. There's no way you could cross that, because I block you out of my life. And again, that's extreme, but sometimes that has to happen. Very good question. I hope that's what you're asking. I hope that helps. Yeah, anyone else before we move on? Okay. There is a hand. There's one over there. Oh, one over there. You're all. Follow.
Hey, Pastor, I wanted to ask, how do you set boundaries when it comes to the opposite sex, whether it's single or marriage?
How do you set boundaries?
Yep.
A great book to read is Boundaries in Dating. And then another one is I Kiss Dating Goodbye. And look, I'm going to go over, I think it is in point 2. Yeah, there's numbers of, these boundaries would help apply with the opposite sex. But Pastor Walsh's theory is especially for dating couples, is the length of a very large Bible. At least when you're walking side by side, and then COVID rules apply. When you're face to face, was it 1.5 meters, 6 feet? Obviously, it depends on the relationship. As far as at the end of the day, some of the opposite sex that's not your wife, don't touch them. Don't touch them. There are certain topics of conversation that are off limits. I say, in the context of marriage, that husband and wife are not to have any emotional link to someone of the opposite sex outside of their marriage. So that's a form of cheating. That if you have an emotional connection, obviously other than dad and son for a wife and mother-daughter, let's not be stupid, but obviously someone who's not family, they have an emotional connection with them, you're cheating on your spouse, right? And so for a guy and a single guy and a single girl to have an emotional connection and not think that that's heading somewhere is foolishness, right? You have a guy who shares all of his problems with a single girl. No, we're just friends, Pastor. You're a donut. You're sharing stuff with her. That to her is wearing love. And she may not say, but there's an emotional connection there, right? Then what happens is you try and date another girl and she finds out he's best friends with this girl here. Best friends. It's a load of rubbish. Best friends with this girl. She's not going to, I'm telling you, she's not going to be a fan of that, right? And guys who think they're going to go into marriage with a girl best friend are tripping on themselves, setting themselves up for catastrophe, right? She ain't going to put up with that. She may put up with it, while you're dating. She might see other things in you that outweigh, and in her mind, I can deal with that. As soon as you get married, she ain't coming around your house. She's not going to put up with that, right? And so, and if ladies, if a guy says he wants to be your best friend, he doesn't want to be your best friend, okay? Guys don't make girls their best friend. Oh, you're my best friend, right? In marriage, absolutely. Outside of marriage, he's not your best friend. He doesn't want a girl as a best friend, all right? And I'm just speaking on behalf of every male here. You don't want a girl as typically, and this is not in this church, hopefully, they usually only want one thing, and that's not your friendship, okay? So let's just burst that bubble right now. So if guys think I'm going to have a girl best friend and a wife, no, it's not going to happen. So there's emotional connections. You need to have boundaries in that. There are just certain things guys and girls should not share with each other outside of marriage, because it's you have no right to tell her your personal battles and struggles and problems and dump that on her. She didn't need that from you. She didn't come to church for that, right? And so having that boundary in place, that it's a friendship, and we talk about the things of God, and and there are things that we can dive into, and get to know each other and that sort of thing, have a friendship, but it still be appropriate, right? So certain topics, obviously, the sex education is off topic, and your emotional battles and struggles, all those sorts of things. So you're thinking through what's appropriate in conversation as well. And if this is delving into an emotional connection, you need to draw a boundary there. Obviously, physical touch, shake hands, is fine. But I'm not a fan of and we don't have that problem here, thank God. But I've probably dealt with it in earlier years in Liverpool. Not that it was a problem then, but just laid the foundation that our single guys and single girls don't hug each other. You know what I mean? We don't have a huggy. It's just a hug fest. You know what I mean? And every single guy, I can't wait for handshaking time. Oh, it's the best part of the service. You go to church and they hug each other, and it's like, okay. You talk to Pastor Darren Manzone, he's not a hugger. You try and give, as a man, try and give him a hug. What are you doing? Get off me, weirdo. He doesn't like it, right? But just just in general, it's just those things. You just stay away from that. Handshake, good handshake. If you want a girl to trust you, touch her. If you wanted to have a confidence, I could marry this guy. Shake her hand, and that's it. Leave it at that. So there's physical boundaries. I could go into all of it, but I'm not going to right now. But that those certain topics of conversation, physical touch, emotional connections, set boundaries around those things. Have a fun and carefree friendship. That's what you want. You don't want to go on away. I need therapy after talking to that guy. Just like that was fun. Anyway, it's not dating advice, but anyone else? Oh yes, there was a hand over here, Rocky. I think everyone's sort of like waiting.
Hey, Pastor. Coming from a home where boundaries are non-existent.
Yeah.
And then learning about boundaries in salvation.
Yeah.
How can I identify what I need to put in place, boundaries that need to be put in place for friendships and relationships moving forward? Yeah,
I think one of the answers is friendship. You talk boundaries in friendship, but having friends and seeing, especially godly friends, and seeing the boundaries they put in place. Seeing your pastor. Oh, okay, I noticed. And you start to identify that, right? And you're watching and observing. So okay, I get that now. And so you're trying to glean off that. And you'd ask questions from time to time. I noticed you did this or you said that. Was that a boundary? Whatever? So you're trying to glean and learn and using your friendships in the church as a training field. That's I didn't get a good response when I did that or said that. It's probably a boundary issue. And so self-awareness is one thing, and that's great that you're able to identify within your home. You didn't learn a lot, to do with boundaries. And so it's okay, I'm aware of that, and so that probably means I'm not natural, or I'm not by default going to understand, or, you know, so I need to learn that, you know. So a self-awareness is really, really going to help. You know, and then obviously, you know, there's good literature out there that you can read the specifics. Boundaries is a great series. There's Boundaries, you know, just the Boundaries, the book, and Boundaries in marriage, Boundaries in dating, Boundaries in relationships. You know, so that's a great series of books to read, and it gives you a great, you know, a thorough understanding of why boundaries are important and what to implement, how to implement them. So there's lots of good books out there. Obviously, one, you know, lesson is not going to hit all of the notes to do with boundaries, but it's going to give you a good foundation, you know. But I think a self-awareness is one thing, you know. How do I set boundaries up around my own life? You know, how do I respect others' boundaries? How do I identify them? You know, those sorts of things, and just learning that, you know, being aware, I think, is a very helpful key in setting up boundaries. It's like, okay, I've got to be aware of this. Yep, very good. Anyone else before we move on? Yes, Mags.
Hey, Pastor, going back to kind of like what Fale was talking about, how can we as leaders, like when we have like fellowships and like obviously in our connect groups, how can we recognize, like, because we have like a lot of single people at the fellowships, how do we like recognize if something's gone like beyond the line, like maybe we need to step in and be like, hey, like move away from each other.
Yeah.
And then also another part of the question is, like us as married couples, how can we, like in those kind of settings, like because sometimes, like we're not like overly touchy, but like like if we're like hugging or like we give each other a kiss and stuff, like is that too much in that type of setting?
Yeah.
Like as a couple or as like Bible study leaders. Like, does that kind of then set off like a vibe or something?
Sure.
In fellowship or in connect?
Yeah, great question. Very, very good question. I guess the answer to the first question is just set up a bunch of spotlights and cameras in your hat. No, review the footage. Hey, no, I think similar to the answer to Rocky's an awareness, right? So in your home, you and your husband are a team, right? And so it's like, okay, we're having a single fellowship. So it's like, we're having a conversation. Hey, let's be a team here and just make sure, you know, that, you know, and obviously we don't think all our single people are just bunny rabbits, you know what I mean? And they're gonna just, you know, just lose their, you know, you lose dominion in 5 seconds. But, you know, it's like, let's be aware. This is a vibe, right? This is all single people, a lot of single people. Let's be mindful of that, you know. And so I think just having a conversation, or just we're aware of that, while you're hosting and that sort of thing, it's just, you know, you're just aware of that if that's going on, I'm not so engrossed in a conversation that I'm not aware of what's going on in my home. So that's the first thing, I think, is just an awareness. That helps. But that's, you know, at the end of the day, if two people want to do the wrong thing, you're gonna go do the wrong thing. Like you can't. It's like and then you follow them home. It's like, what are you doing? Where are you going? At some point, there's a limit, you know. And so, yes, we are responsible for what happens in our home. But if people are, you know, are going to do the wrong thing, you're going to do the wrong thing. And so there's a line where that it's like, well, you just wanted to do the wrong thing anyway. So no one's going to. God Himself's not going to stop you. You want to do the wrong. That's on you. But you know, when we have, you know, especially when we're in Parramatta, similar situation. All young people, right? And so, you know, I never had dim lights. Lights weren't off. All the lights, everything's lit up. And if there are ever people singling themselves out around a corner or something, wait, what are you doing? You know, and that was just the culture of our house. No one ever really tried that, and you know, Jacob could probably testify to that. No, we're always all together. You know, but if there ever were a guy and a girl that sort of singled themselves off, oi, get over here. And they knew that I was going to do that. And it wasn't like a embarrassing rebuke. It was like, you know, it was, what are you doing? Get back over here, you know. Don't be weirdos over there, you know, in the dark. And so, you know, you've got to be willing and prepared to do that type of stuff, you know. And so, you know, you have a plan in place with your husband when that happens, or is happening. What are we going to do? How do we respond to that? Are you going to step in? Am I going to step in? At what point? Is it me? Is it you? You know, so have a plan in place for that happening. But typically the culture is we're all together. We don't allow people to just go off and talk in the, around the back or in the laundry somewhere or whatever, It's like, you stay out here. So you have those, those boundaries. You set those boundaries, in the culture of your study, and people know they're not just going to go off and have private conversation, single guy and a girl. If you're going to do that, you do that, in pastor's office. But in saying that, with dating couples, and this is not what you asked, but Pastor Darren and Joe Manzone were a great blessing to us, because Adele and I were able to go there, and with their accountability, we're able to have, hash things out and have conversations. They were there. They, sometimes Pastor Manzone would, step in, hey, cool it down, you two, or whatever, help us out. But typically, they just provided us with a home that we could be safe. There's accountability. That's our assistant pastor and his wife. And so you can be that for dating couples as well. And dating couples should utilize that. So we want a dating with accountability, but there are things we've got to work out from time to time. Let's call Juan and Margaret, because last time let's go over their house, and you can be, whatever you're doing, Juan could be, whatever he's doing, but in the house, you're together. There's accountability. And so, that's a helpful thing sometimes as well for dating couples. That'd be good to do. What was the second part to your question? Yeah. That's right. Yeah, so that is a good question, and I think there is probably, in that setting, my wife and I going back, I don't think we were all over each other. I think we're still. I think there's a level of affection that is an example. And it's like, but again, we're not pashing on at the singles fellowship. I mean, it's probably just an appropriate embrace, because I want people, people that are following our example. I love my wife, and I'm not afraid to show her. But again, what's appropriate? I'm not, And so that's a great point. And I think you want people that are looking at that to have a godly desire for that. So I want that, he's not over the top, but I want that, but I want what they have, and I want to do it the right way. And so, I think there's, at the end of the day, like I said, if two people want to do the wrong thing, they're going to do the wrong thing. But I would still definitely tone it down for when you've got fellowships, people around, especially young people. So we're not, we're toning it down. But some affection is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I know my wife and I, for a lot of people, when we first came to Liverpool, our PDA was a little bit confronting. And, I'd say to Dad, what PDA? I'm like, what? I don't think I've ever kissed you at church. Maybe I have. I don't know. I don't think we're that affectionate. But apparently, an arm, or a kiss on the cheek is, whoa, the heck, that's weird, that's too much. But I think it's healthy, So anyway. As long as people get a room, it's not that bad. Come on, guys. Hallelujah. Great questions this morning. Anyone else? It's 10:15. I don't know if we're going to get to through the second point. That's for sure. Does anyone want to ask another question? Okay, let's move on. We'll go for another couple of minutes. So we've got 1 Corinthians 5:11 from Laurie, and that's a little bit down. So let's see if we let me just get Proverbs 29:18. Who can get that from Rocky? And then Proverbs 4:23 from Belma. If we get there, we get there. Let's see how we go. So establishing boundaries. How do we establish this for ourselves? How do we establish boundaries? Firstly, we need to understand boundary types. And so there's one source that says there are 6 types of boundaries. This might be in the series on boundaries. And so these work for both for you, but also towards others, right? And so physical, space and touch, that's the first area or type of boundary. Second is emotional. So we talked about this a bit with Fali's question, protecting your emotional well-being and feelings, and also Salati's question as well. Then there's intellectual. What is appropriate or not depending on the setting or in context of the setting. Intellectual boundaries. There are also material boundaries, personal items and belongings. There are time boundaries. How many people can violate your time boundaries? All right, 2 friends meeting up for coffee. 9 o'clock, I'll be there. 9:45, you stroll in with your hair like that. no message, no phone call. That's need to set some time boundaries up. So how you allocate your time, knowing priorities, and then there are sexual boundaries. Number 6, this is about living righteous. And so each of these work out in different areas of life, and they sometimes overlap. But it's a good question to ask: do I have these boundaries? Have I thought about them? Have I established them, and then implemented them? And so the question to ask is also for parents: are you teaching them to your children? Are you vocalizing them in your relationships, marriage, friendships, family, ministry? Do others know your boundaries? And so establishing them, have you set them up in your relationships? If no, then you may have what's called porous boundaries, where you tend to lack clear boundaries or demarcations in your life. And people continue to violate them, or because there's no boundary to violate. You have difficulty saying no. You take on too much. Your identity becomes intertwined with the expectations of others. And so your limits then can often become blurred, right? And so that's porous boundaries. There's a lack of clear lines around your life. Or it's possible that others may have rigid boundaries. Right? They're so tight, they cause you to be emotionally distant. You have a strong aversion to vulnerabilities. You have defenses or defensive walls for threats, real or imagined. And you have a limited support network, which hinders growth and impedes development. No, it's just boundaries. So what do you mean? You haven't talked to anyone in the last 6 weeks? Yeah, I just blocked everyone in my phone book. It's not a boundary. That's a bit too rigid. So we need balance, right? We need a balance in our lives where we are open to connection, but we maintain our personal integrity and self-care, right? We can have friendships, but we have boundaries. Healthy boundaries are a balance between porous and rigid, right? So balance is key. How do I get this right? What the boundaries that I'm putting in place, how do I implement them? To what degree? And so this is definitely something that I've learned from my pastor. I mean, God is a God of boundaries. He's a God of order, right? And so seeing my pastor establish boundaries in his own life, marriage, with his children, pastoring in church, different things, been able to see this, right? And implement them myself. And so God is a God of boundaries. He says in Hosea 6, 1 Samuel 15. Jesus also says in Matthew 8, talking about boundaries and establishing boundaries. Jesus says in Matthew 8, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, right? He's talking about a balance there. It's not all about religious sacrifice. And I want mercy. There's grace, right? So it's rules versus the heart. It's truth and love. Right? It's the tension or the balance between those two. Yes, there's the truth, but let's do this in love. There's grace. And so it's not too rigid. It's not too porous. Right, so in building boundaries, a couple of things to know here. Firstly, a focus on self, right? Not the needs of others. That's what a boundary is. I've seen people blur boundaries because of family or friends. With other people, but then for themselves, it's to their own detriment because they're trying to people please, whatever it is. And so with boundaries, you're thinking about yourself. Some people, they think about others. They're not thinking about themselves. You need to, this is not selfish to think about yourself. That's what a boundary is, right? You can't, put boundaries around other people. You may do that in another setting, but we're talking about yourself. You need to think about yourself. Think about your marriage. Like I was talking to Eugene, or in the answer there, you need to think about your marriage, your kids, right? Salvation ministry. In setting boundaries, it could, like they're in sin, rebellion, immoral, right? So 1 Corinthians 5 verse 11.
But now I have written to you not to keep company with anyone named a brother who is sexually immoral or covetous or an idolater or a reviler or a drunkard or an extortioner, not even to eat with such a person. Okay, so that's a boundary, right? That's a boundary that you set around your own life. And so your boundaries are yours and not someone else's. So as an individual, as a couple, as parents, they're our boundaries.
They're boundaries that we're setting in place. So you first need to think about yourself. Secondly, you need to know your communication style. If you're not firm or you are not clear about your boundaries, then people will either take advantage of you or simply not realizing you're setting a boundary because you're not firm, because of your communication style. So tone, volume, eye contact, they all matter, right? You don't set a boundary just in passing. Oh, by the way, I don't want you to do whatever. Hey, listen, can we talk? Can we maybe sit down and talk? Can I have a serious conversation with you? People know, okay, there's something serious going on here. And so the way you communicate is important to, and so when should boundaries be set? What's the timing? All right, so one psychologist said the earlier they are set, the better, because boundary setting lets people know your expectations and or your preferences. And so remember, your boundaries are your responsibility. You have to develop and establish boundaries with other people, and sooner the better. So there's a quote, don't sacrifice yourself for the sake of other people. Too often without boundaries, people lose who they are. They do what they didn't want or think they would do and allow what they never thought they would allow. So without boundaries, that is often the case. We're allowing things we don't or wouldn't think we would have allowed. Amen. Does anyone have a question there before we close for service? Very quickly. Yes, Tanu.
Pastor, just to clarify on the verse that Laurie mentioned, is that a boundary that we can only set within the church or also in the world?
Oh, in the world, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's obviously talking about a sinning brother. And so, that's I think in the context of that is church discipline, but part of that also ought to extend to your personal life as well, right? And so, that's you need wisdom outside of the church how to implement that boundary, right? But if you've got, not you, just anyone, a family member who's got naked women posters all over his house, let's have tea this afternoon. Be sus on that call, right? So you need to set a boundary. I'm not going to go to your house, bro. Right? So there, some family members or friends that I had in the past, and we maintain some level of friendship because they're not actively coming to church, but there's someone from the past, they're family members, and I wouldn't agree to go to certain places with them. Wouldn't go to their house, sometimes wouldn't meet at a certain time of day. I'd only have breakfast with them or go for a surf with them. Some just good, clean fun. Somewhere I can't be, I say to people from time to time, at a Christmas, Christmas function at work, right? A work dinner. We're going to go on a cruise. I said, don't do it. Don't put I'm going to catch a taxi or an Uber, or I'm going to get a lift with brother so-and-so to the city or whatever. Don't do it. Take your own car. Get your own form of transport. Don't go out on a cruise with a bunch of sinners, right? And you hear the horror stories. I had a friend who, young, naive, for a first-year apprentice, go on a cruise. Oh, no, no, it's going to be fine. It's all going to be good. And so he stupidly agrees to go on the cruise, and strippers come out. He's stuck on a cruise. You've got to jump overboard, swim to shore, right? So it's boundaries, certain boundaries in place. I'm not going to go certain places with so it still applies in that setting, But this is talking about a brother who's actively sinning in rebellion, whatever, that sort of thing. Don't even eat with them. So but again, you have to use wisdom to apply that in relationships outside of the church, because I don't think God ate with tax collectors, prostitutes. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, he's not listening to his own command. No, it's wisdom in applying those things outside of church relationships. Very good question. We're going to stop there. It's 10:26. We'll have service in a few moments.